I'm Sharon Denny, AFTD's Senior Director of Programs, and I'm glad to be here with you today. I'm also really pleased and honored to bring you our second panel of speakers for the day. The folks with us now are going to be focusing on FTD care and support to complement what you heard about research in the morning. So it's my great pleasure to have with us up here on the panel Dr. Mary Guerriero Austrom, Professor of Clinical Psychology at Indiana University School of Medicine. She's a researcher and an FTD caregiver support group leader. And next to her is Mary O'Hara, a licensed clinical social worker who's been supporting families living with FTD and PPA for 14 years. Next to Mary is Chuck Anastasia, who is an AFTD-affiliated support group leader and was a devoted care partner for his wife, VJ. And next to him is Laurie Scherrer, who was diagnosed with FTD and young onset Alzheimer's in 2013, and today devotes her time to dementia advocacy. And so without further ado, I'm going to introduce to you Mary Austrom, who will share her perspective on research in FTD care and support.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sharon, and Sharon and the whole FTD. I'm delighted to be here. And there you have a little bit about me. My acknowledgments were, we are one of the NIH-funded Alzheimer's Disease Center. I've been with, I confess to Mary next to me, since the inception, the development of this center, and I hate to report that we're now 28 years old of continual funding, but somehow I don't feel 28 years older. And to our lovely speaker this morning, I am still wearing heels. I can't give it up. But, you know, my bunions cry at the end of the day. So I have no conflicts of interest. Sharon called me and wanted me to come out and talk a little bit about where we've come with the research on FTD caregivers and families. And as I reflected and listened to the research panel, like basic research and clinical trials this morning, I have to say it's the exact same journey as I've watched this research grow and develop in Alzheimer's dementia. So I see the parallels of dementia and where the AFTD groups are going, and it's very exciting. And I really appreciated the reviews on basic research and intervention versus observational, so you've heard about that. And what's most exciting that I've seen over the past few years is this movement from descriptive observational studies to real intervention studies. So like the tailored activity program, and where we can measure in a group getting the tailored activity program, working with a person with FTD and their care partners, and see how those engagement and meaningful activities has a positive benefit on both patient and caregiver. That's tremendous, as opposed to simply describing the percentage of distressed caregivers, burdened caregivers, challenges and behaviors we see in the patients. It's nice now to see if we use this activity, we're seeing benefits and improved outcomes. And that's where we want to see the research going, both in the specific programs, projects, activities we can help coach, educate, and engage the dyad in, but also now these initially developed drug trials specifically for AD, or using some of the FTD, using some of the AD drugs that exist and testing them in our patients. That's very exciting to see if we can get some outcomes now. So that's the exciting thing. I also had an example where Sharon and Susan and I had gotten a national grant a few years ago and did some focus group studies on brain donation and how well researchers and care partners and families engage well together in this discussion. And we learned a lot. We've published on that. It's very, very exciting. And another study I've got up there, and I do have to say my slides were updated for this talk, but you have an earlier version in the booklet. So you actually have more slides, but I did update this one because we've started, and my colleague in neurology, Dr. Apostolova, has gotten one of the biggest grants in history for something called the LEADS trial. and I'll have a slide on that. And then again with Dr. Morhart at Northwestern, myself, we're looking at a caregiver's needs assessment that we've started. But again now, with what we've learned in other focus groups and Darby's work, we're actually comparing needs of behavioral FTD caregivers and PPA caregivers. Even within the same FTD kind of syndrome of diseases, I think it affects families, care partners, and patients very differently. And we're getting able to describe those. Tailored activity program, I gave you a little bit of background of that and shared with it a little bit. Person is engaged in a meaningful activity. So the idea is nobody knows your patient like you do. What did they like to do before? How can we tailor that activity so they can stay engaged? But remember, they have to still want to do that activity or somehow is meaningful to them, right? We can lead the horse to water, but we can't make them drink. So offering any activity that means nothing to the patient can obviously be more distressing than helpful. So these are things you would work together on. We have a very similar study called DEMA, Daily Engagement in Meaningful Activities, with very early stage dementia, like MCI, if you've heard about that, and we're seeing great results. So we're very excited about this kind of program. So FTD and the LEADS study. So LEADS is Longitudinal Early AD Study. So looking at these early, again, very early onset, the ages overlap with our FTD population, and this will be an observational long-term study. But what's exciting, and the research panel just talked about all FTD, which will be, we're still waiting to hear if it will get funded. But what's really exciting about this is Dr. Apostolova wants all comers. We want all early onset patients and families to reach out and participate in this. If the brain imaging and the clinical results show that this FTD patient actually has more amyloid deposits, indicative of more an Alzheimer's type, they would be encouraged and invited to engage in LEADS. But if they actually show it's the tau deposits and very much or an FTD mutation, all of those will be funneled and channeled to this all FTD, all in for FTD. So these two large projects working together has all the researchers abuzz. And we are also a multi-site trial. I don't know if you can read those all, but, you know, we've got some of the wonderful speakers. Dr. Mendez is here from UCLA, working with UCSF, Pennsylvania, Washington, our shop, Johns Hopkins, Mass General, Mayo Clinics. So hopefully our caregivers and patients will get involved with this once we hear about funding. It's very exciting. And then we've been doing, this is a couple of slides you have on our qualitative interviews that we have held with our caregivers of FTD, behavioral variant, and the PPA. And we only interviewed but 5 one-on-one in-depth interviews with caregivers in each group. Both at Indiana, we had 10, and at Northwestern, 5 and 5 each, we're moving up to 10. And you have got the beautiful, poignant quotes from family caregivers in your packet, but we identified themes of just how challenging the diagnosis journey was, and we heard from the board chair this morning about her journey with her husband. That is so common with the behavioral variant kind. The PPA families actually said, they got the diagnosis much quicker. I think, I don't realize I still had an X more years in there. You can fill in the X with 4.5 years longer. So it took our behavioral variant families on average to get their diagnosis 4.5 years later than a PPA. So imagine that confusing journey. And then the most challenging aspects of caregiving that we've heard, and you've heard it from families today, and some of the data, the level of depression among our caregivers is extra high. Of course, adapting to changing roles, that inertia or apathy and personality changes, certainly for behavioral variant, is so difficult. Financial, legal issues. I still have 2 caregivers in my support group that have either legally separated and divorced to manage the financials, so that the whole family wasn't ruined, that the children would have college funds. I mean, it's just tragic. And then the non-normative losses, the wonderful family caregiver that just spoke and talk about how many losses that we experience across this journey. So the grief is qualitatively different. And families certainly helped us identify coping strategies. I mean, that knowledge and education, self-care habits and behaviors for our caregivers. If you don't care for yourself first, you're no good to anyone. And I don't know how many times we end up with 2 patients and no caregiver, right? And all the diseases I work with. So I can't stress that enough. And of course, and kudos to AFTD, the support group structure is so important, but it's relatively still a rare disease. So these telephone support groups are incredibly important, because we have caregivers driving from a 3-hour, I'm losing my words, Sharon, from a 3-hour distance, north, south, east, west, coming to Indianapolis for a one-time monthly support group. We need to do better. We need to offer more technology, because it's exhausting. And then our caregivers gave us some incredibly important advice for us, for the healthcare providers, is just, I can't tell you how many times my families will text me. They're so anxious about going to see the neurologist and wanting time one-on-one. They would like to just speak their story and their truth one-on-one. I'm constantly trying to coach our providers to make that time available. They would love a roadmap for this disease. Boy, I wish I had one, right? If I could say in 4 years you must do X, in 18 months you must do that. If I had that cookbook, it would be wonderful. But unfortunately, it's so idiosyncratic and so heterogeneous a presentation, it's hard for any provider to give that. And that progressive nature of the illness, many caregivers said, I really didn't get it until we're well into this disease. So the valuable importance of education and information sharing can't be overstressed. And I can't, and following me will be a clinical social worker. The role of the social worker can't be understated, and we need more, especially ones that have training in these kind of disorders, dementia, degenerative disorders in general, because it looks very different than, a cancer diagnosis or heart disease or diabetes. This is a different disease for our families. And then our next steps, of course, we're continuing to collect some interviews, and we really understand some of these specific differences with the goal to develop more interventions. And my career has really been built on non-pharmacological interventions for AD patients and their caregivers before we go to the psychotropic drugs. So I'm a big proponent of the environment and behavioral interaction of caregiver education. So our goal is new and improved interventions. So thank you very much. One of my favorite statements to end is, just because we can't cure FTD yet doesn't mean we don't care and that we don't provide care. So that's one of my favorite slides for the providers in my world. And feel free to stop me. I'll be around most of the day and the reception tonight, and you can email me anytime. Thank you very much.
So that's a nice bridge, because we want to blend the research that's happening in the biopharmaceutical world research happening in the care world. And now I'm going to ask Mary O'Hara to take us into the more practical aspects of applying this in your lives.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Mary O'Hara, and I'm going to be talking about recommendations and next steps to be supporting people with a diagnosis and their families. My hope is that no matter where you live, you are able to connect with a person or a place that can offer guidance over the course of this disease. In the beginning, maybe they're helping you prioritize next steps or ways to talk about this with family, or maybe they're helping you find local resources and helping ideas for transitions in care when that time comes. And this is going to look different in every area. Maybe you can ask your neurologist for a referral for someone like this, but that may not exist where you live yet. With the help of the AFTD, someday, hopefully it will. But if that kind of professional isn't available, there are telephone groups and the online community that I hope you see as these lighthouses for you. And they really exist to be a source of guidance along the way when the seas can feel rough. I know I am not the first person to encourage you to get your affairs in order. I say this today because it's worth repeating. Meeting with an elder law attorney, not only to set up power of attorney and advance directives and wills, things like that, but they can also help with Medicaid planning so that perhaps you can set up a trust so that when it is time to apply for Medicaid, you would be eligible and you would be able to enroll in that program. Additionally, they can help with guardianship if a person doesn't have a power of attorney and is really endangering themselves either physically or financially, and someone needs to step in to become their guardian. Of course, if you're under 65 and have worked 5 of the last 10 years, you'd be eligible for Social Security disability, and then after that, you'd be eligible for Medicare as your health insurance 2 years later. I want families to know that if you work for a company with more than 50 employees, you would be entitled to access family medical leave benefits, so that would allow you to take 12 weeks of time off of your job. This is unpaid, but it would secure your job if you did need to take some time off to support someone with this disease. I also encourage you to start gathering information about the cost of care as the disease progresses. There are a few websites that offer this kind of tool. Genworth Financial is one of them, but you can, or cost of long-term care calculator. You can look by region what the average cost of an adult day program might be per month, or assisted living, or in-home care. So it will allow you, as you are doing some planning, allow you to get a sense of what care might cost in the future. I recognize many of you are doing this right now, balancing independence with safety. I do always encourage everyone to have one of those cards that says, I have PPA and may need more time to communicate, or this person has BVFTD and has changes in their behavior. It's a chance to allow other people to have a little more compassion for what you're going through, and so that you don't have to explain everything about the disease. If you are concerned about driving, I encourage you to ask for a driving evaluation, to request that. This is an area where we err on the side of safety, and it is really important to be getting an evaluation if there are concerns. Thinking about removing or making sure that weapons are safely stored in the home. Also, if judgment is impaired, we want to make sure that you're monitoring credit cards and bank accounts and investments and the internet. We know people are very vulnerable, especially with BVFTD, to get involved in these devastating financial scams. So to be aware and to be keeping an eye on that. Occupational therapy can be so helpful. They really take the approach of how can we modify the environment to help support a person's independence. So a home safety evaluation might be helpful at some point. And similarly, physical therapy is another referral that you might request if there are any changes in balance or gait or any falls. And if there are changes in mood that are very distressing to the person or to family, do request a referral for a psychiatrist, a geriatric psychiatrist, if that exists where you are. And there are often disagreements around these safety issues. So do seek the help of your team, of the lighthouses that you are connected to as you face these transitions, because the focus needs to be on helping the person adjust, not on convincing them that they can't drive anymore or that they can't travel to Mexico anymore by themselves. So again, the focus is on adjusting, not convincing. Many of you are also adapting communication and adapting your expectations. Working with a speech therapist, if there are challenges with communication and language, can be so helpful. The focus is on learning how to compensate for the losses, and it's strength-based, so it's using what remains to help a person still connect and still communicate. And I think it's just important to recognize and to plan that things are going to take more time. Conversations are going to take more time, getting out of the house is going to take more time, getting to appointments is going to take more time, and just accepting that that is part of this disease. There's an exercise I share with families. It's an acronym STOP, and it stands for stop. You can even say that. T stands for take a deep breath, or maybe 5 deep breaths. Observe what's happening. Observe how you're feeling. Maybe you're feeling frustrated. Maybe you're feeling angry. Maybe you're feeling resentful. Maybe you're feeling pain. And just acknowledging what that is that you're feeling. And then P stands for proceed. And so maybe you proceed by going back and just bringing a little bit more patience and understanding when you're working with the person. Or maybe that means you need to take a walk by yourself just around the block. So it's a chance to pause before you respond, just preventing this reaction that we might have when we get frustrated or upset. For people with difficulty communicating, I do really encourage them to consider some alternative form of processing their emotions if they really feel the need to do that. Art therapy or music therapy can be another form of expression if language becomes more difficult. And it is so important for all of you that at the end of the day to reflect on what went well, where the strengths are that remain, and where there was connection, and maybe even where there was laughter. You are also balancing engagement with respite and also with safety. We know these recommendations of keeping a schedule, a very predictable and familiar daily routine can be really helpful. And I'm sure many of you have heard these brain health suggestions of getting regular exercise and a healthy diet and staying mentally engaged and socially connected. And these are important, but I recognize that for families living with FTD, these are challenging. These are lifestyle changes that is hard for a healthy person to implement in their lives, and it's even more challenging for a person with a brain disorder to start doing these things. And I recognize that these things, encouraging families to do these things can sometimes cause guilt, that if you can't get the person to do these things, that you feel guilty about that. I also don't want a family to feel increased stress or anxiety because they're trying to put these things in place. Stress and anxiety would negate any benefit that you'd get from these things. So we really want to be realistic about those kinds of lifestyle changes. And also it's worth noting that in cases of apathy, which we know can happen with FTD, a person may not be willing to do these things, but also, as Dr. Menendez said, accepting the passive participation is okay too. A person's presence can be their participation. They don't have to be entirely engaged or smiling while they're there. Increasing engagement and connection over the course of the disease is also a way to increase a person's safety, decrease their isolation, and increase respite for the family members. And so everyone is going to benefit when we are finding ways of increasing engagement. I encourage these types of engagement might look different in the areas that you live, but I really encourage you to return to your support groups or to the lighthouses that I mentioned earlier to ask what types of engagement are in your area and think about what might be most appropriate for your family. Many people ask, when is it time? When is it time to make a change in care? I want to point out again that you do not have to make that decision alone. That there are professionals who can help provide that guidance and other family members who have been through this before who can help you with that. But I think a change in care, it really needs to happen when either a diagnosed person's safety, health, and well-being is at risk, or a family member's safety, health, and well-being is at risk if they are the primary caregiver. And maybe the person with the diagnosis has stayed the same and nothing has changed for some time, but it's really the spouse or the adult child providing care whose health is at risk and whose emotional health is at risk. So that's when a change of care needs to happen. If you are looking into other types of care, be sure to talk to other families who have used that service. So I always encourage families to ask for a referral. Have you cared for people with FTD before? Can I talk to those families if you're looking at a day program or looking into a long-term care facility? And again, as you prepare for different transitions, remember that the focus is on helping the person to adjust and supporting them through that, not convincing them of the change. So for both people with a diagnosis and family members, tend to your emotional needs. If you are finding feelings of grief or guilt or sadness, consider talking to someone about that. Maybe the person with the diagnosis was the person you always talked to about how you were doing, and so finding another place to process those feelings is really important. Filling yourself up with what centers you. So set intentions to regularly do that as much as you can to take care of yourself. Maybe that's taking 10 deep breaths every time you get in the car, or getting back to an instrument that you played, or just going on a walk with a friend, but finding what fills you up. And then finally, sending out your signal when you need help. So many people I work with say, I'm not good at asking for help. But when people offer it, it's a chance to start practicing accepting help. And if they offer, you can tell them, I could actually use some help mowing my lawn or repairing something in my house, or just checking in with me on a regular basis. The AFTD quality of life and respite care grants are a great resource for you to know about as you're thinking about what kind of additional support could benefit you and your family and finding respite. And then finally, I think so many of you are reconciling two very opposing ideas, that you are a daughter of someone and you are also their caregiver. Or that you are grieving and sad, but you are also doing your best living your best life as you can. And that you are also holding on to what remains and letting go of what is lost. And I think finding the care and supporting guidance to reconcile these things, but also help you find strength and hope along the way. So thank you.
Now it's my pleasure to introduce Laurie Scherrer to you.
I've been told sometimes I run over, so I've got to hit my timer here. I apologize. In August of 2013, after being to 5 different doctors, I was diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's and FTD. I knew what the A word was, but flowers on the brain, that sounded pretty good to me, right? Wrong. As I learned what FTD was, the doctor looked at my husband and I and said, go home, get your affairs in order, see an elder care attorney, spend as much time with your friends and family as you can, and come back in 6 months and let's see how much you've progressed. Well, since we went home and went through woe is me, went through a series of depression, grief, loss, and I start going downhill real fast. Finally, my husband and I kind of kicked me in the tush and said, you haven't lived your life in this manner. It was time to kick myself in the tush, get moving, get myself motivated. I had taught sales training for years and years, and what did I teach? I think I can. Come on, you can do it. And here I was going, I'm dying, the doctor said so. And because the doctor said so, what do? You believe him. Well, after a little bit, my husband and I put together what you see here, and that was our strategies for how we were going to really live whatever time I had left to live. I've often thought it would be fun to go back and see some of those 5 doctors that told me to go home and die, because since then, last year I spoke in 36 different places. I was interviewed for the New York Times, AARP, the Reading Eagle, etc. This year so far I've spoken 4 places, and I just spoke in 4 different locations in South Africa. So, whoa, I'm running out of time already. I want to tell you how we do that. Real important. Empower, encourage, enable, engage, and since then we've added another one, which is eliminate. My husband does everything he can when I'm having a bad day, when I'm going downhill and having a meltdown, to observe what has triggered the confusion, the disorientation, the agitation. And then we make adjustments in order to compensate for that. And I'll give you one example. In our kitchen, we have a light switch that can go on either way, either end of the room. Well, if you push this one down, then that one's up, right? One evening, I always use that end of the room. One evening, I went to turn off the light, and the switch was already down. I went into a total meltdown. I start crying and screaming, Roy, we're going to have a fire. The house is going to catch fire. Get the dogs. Let's get out of the house. We've got an electrical problem. Took him a while to figure out what was going on, but once he did, he was like, Laura, it's all right. It's okay. It's just a light switch. Here, I'll fix it. Well, that sounds really great, but in my head, we were going to have a fire. And nothing he said or did could convince me we weren't going to have a fire. Something as small as a light switch can pull us down real quick. Well, now we have a piece of tape over the light switch on that end, so that never happens. Never again. He said once is enough. The first time I had problems with speech. I had aphasia. I couldn't speak to him. I was upset. Once I was together again, he and I learned 20 words in American Sign Language. And we practiced them constantly, just 20 words. Pain, thirsty, hungry. Why American Sign Language? Because if I ever go to the hospital, they're going to be able to understand me as well, because they're required to have an interpreter. So now, when I'm in a position where I can't speak, I can say, I have pain, I'm confused. It's important to provide social interaction, both for the care provider and for the person living with FTD. You both need that. It's important you look at me, and talk to me. We met some friends of ours, at least I thought they were friends, in a grocery store one day, and the person looked at my husband and said, "How is she?" Okay. Boy, include laughter and fun in every single day. Don't let one day go by that you don't laugh. I love the game Dumb Ways to Die. Has anybody played that? Okay, it makes me laugh. It's the stupidest game you could imagine. But on days when I'm really having a bad day, my husband hands me my laptop and turns on Dumb Ways to Die because he knows I'm going to start laughing. And if you look at it, you're going to say, why does she like it? It's a stupid game. It is. Go to restaurants during off hours. Oh, I'm over?
It's all right.
Shoot, I told you. Go to restaurants during off hours. Don't stop going. Look up Purple Table Program. It's a program just for people with cognitive disabilities. Provide earplugs. Don't go home without them. I've lost my ability to filter noise. As I'm speaking here, I'm hearing myself so bad that it would really cause a meltdown. So when we go someplace, I have earplugs and I have sunglasses so that I knock out the stimulation, overstimulation, and hearing. Empower me. Don't disable me. How do you do that? Don't do things for me. Help me do them. Routine is essential. Absolutely essential, especially in the morning and in the evening. Whoever switched that, thank you. It is very, very important to have a routine. Without a routine, I'm lost. I don't know what I'm supposed to do, and it's going to bring me down. Provide assistance to help me do things so I can do them longer. Remember that FTD and many dementias, they're like a roller coaster. I'm going to have good days and bad days, good moments and bad moments. I played guitar since the time I was 10 years old. There's times I pick up my guitar and I look at it, it's foreign to me. And there's other times I pick it up and I can play it, and that makes me so happy. You're going to have good and bad, the ups and downs. Encourage. You need to encourage. Embrace the things I can do. If today all I can do is button my own shirt, yay! Awesome, you did that. Give me that encouragement. And I'm running through here real quick because I know I'm over. Get involved with conversation. Show pictures, lots of pictures. I have over 18,000 pictures on my computer. And I watch them at least once every 2 weeks. My husband and I sit and go through them. Otherwise, I won't remember those times. Eliminate. Eliminate stress as much as possible, and eliminate negativity as much as possible. That's going to bring you down no matter who you are, whether you have FTD or not. So eliminate them totally. And last but not least, when you can't control what's happening, whether you're a care partner or whether you're a person living with FTD, when you can't control what's happening, challenge yourself to control the way you respond to it. And I want to share one more thing here, and that's these cards, which Mary talked about. Cards are excellent. This is one that AFTD has at the registration desk. I had some made up specifically for me, but they have on the back what's real important, and that is, please be patient. I have dementia. I may repeat questions. I may forget what you've told me. I may take longer to make decisions. I give this to everybody I meet. I go to a restaurant, I hand it to the that person that helps me, with that side up. I go on an airplane, I hand it to them. This has gotten me out of more poor situations than I can tell you. Thank you, and I'm sorry I'm over.
And the last perspective we're going to offer for you today to kind of spark things for the rest of the afternoon is Chuck Anastasia, the perspective of a care partner.
Thank you. I'm here to honor my late wife, VJ, and to help others coping with FTD because I'm grateful for the families who shared their experience, which made our journey easier. I'm going to use notes because I could talk all day and we don't have time for that. Your FTD experience may be very different from ours. I'm going to share a few snapshots from VJ's FTD journey and hope to convey my vision of hope while giving you a sense of what it felt like. And as you look at these pictures, I hope you'll notice VJ's smile. Our daughter Emily graduated college when VJ was diagnosed in 2013. I did a lot of research and took a free online Living with Dementia course that was offered by Johns Hopkins University. It introduced me to person-centered care that respects each patient as a unique individual. We developed a 5-point care plan to maintain routines, exercise as much as practical, eat healthy, stay socially connected and engaged, and manage symptoms with medications. So these points of the care plan help to guide our decision-making to maintain the best possible quality of life. And this is VJ with her loyal friend Susan, who visited often. VJ spent mornings at a senior center for an exercise program, and I hired a home companion so she wouldn't be alone for hours when I was working. And then in 2014, VJ started having urinary accidents, and that ended her days at the senior center because they require participants to be independent. She enrolled in an adult day program. I enlisted additional care providers at the early stages when it was easy for VJ to accept assistance from others, and this allowed me to take needed breaks from caregiving to recharge. Our daughter's wedding was the highlight of 2017, and we also recorded the VJ and Chuck awareness video that's on the AFTD website in July of 2017. And please raise your hand if you've seen that video, the VJ and Chuck video. Thank you. So for those who haven't seen it, go look on the website and please share it with your friends. So we had lived in the same house for 34 years, but VJ started having trouble going up and down the stairs. So we sold our house and moved to a one-level home. Emily and her husband helped us move. Emily took VJ for the weekend while my son-in-law and I packed with the movers and set up the new place so it would be ready when they returned. The move was smooth, and VJ adapted well to the new place for a time. And this is VJ with her sister and Oscar, the therapy cat, at Steer House in November of 2018. In 2018, VJ started becoming more agitated. She started pushing and shoving, and she slapped her home companion. I was worried that someone would get hurt, so I started visiting facilities, and I put her on waiting lists at a couple of skilled nursing homes. In the fall, she fell several times. She wasn't injured, but I had to call for rescue because I couldn't get her up. I was not sleeping enough at that time and started to become exhausted. And Steer House called me with an opening in November, and I was given 24 hours to either accept the room or it would go to the next family. The day of her admission, I cried to myself, "What have I done?" But that was followed by a sense of relief, like a weight was lifted off me. I visited VJ at Steer House every day, but her decline accelerated. The medical team made changes to her meds, and her agitation went out of control for a while. They said it takes time to balance the medications, but I met with the social workers and advocated persistently when I felt her needs were not being met. Her palliative care nurse recommended hospice, which provided a higher level of care. We also had uplifting experiences in the nursing home, and our grandson Miles was born December 14th. That was just 6 days before VJ's birthday. This is Miles with VJ celebrating her birthday. That was her best day in the nursing home. But by the end of January, she was sleeping more and eating and drinking less, so I asked our priest to come and anoint her. VJ was peaceful at the end, but she had to be sedated to manage her agitation. Her hospice team tried to back off the meds to find a balance where she would be comfortable and awake enough to eat and drink, but it just didn't work. 5 days before she died, I brought her a chocolate milkshake from her favorite ice cream shop. She woke up enough to drink most of it. After that, she only took small amounts of food and drink, but it was not enough to sustain her. On the morning of February 13th, the charge nurse called, telling me she was so sorry VJ had passed. I rushed to Steer House and was met by the hospice chaplain. I had a few minutes alone with her, and her sister arrived shortly after that, and our priest. We prayed for VJ, saddened by our loss, but relieved that her journey was over. So this is VJ's brain donor card, and it is my vision of hope. VJ enrolled in a study at Mass General's FTD clinic in 2016. They did brain scans and neuropsychological testing for 3 years. I wanted VJ to enroll in the brain donation program, but I didn't want to frighten her. I was reluctant to give her the consent forms, but when I eventually did, her reaction was very positive. She said, "Yes, I'll donate my brain. It's important for the future and for our kids." And I'll wrap up by comparing optimism with the power of hope, because brain donations are what give us hope. Optimism is when you look out the window and you can see the storm is clearing. There might be a hint of bright light in the sky, and it looks good, and you feel things are going to get better. Well, hope is when you look out the window and there's nothing out there but black, ugly clouds swirling for as far as the eye can see. But hope chooses to go beyond the evidence and create new possibilities based on vision and courage. And that becomes contagious, allowing people to engage in heroic actions and find strength we didn't know we had to do things we didn't know were possible. That is the power of hope. Thank you.
So it's with great thanks that we wrap up this panel, but the takeaway message is that every perspective matters around this disease. And so I do want to thank our panelists. They will be around the rest of the afternoon, and I hope that you'll look for them and connect with them.